ghostly, a blacker red beneath, billowing skyward rather lazily, enjoying themselves, knowing that the worst was over, the blind snaking between walls, underneath floors, the fire's panicked attempt to find more air. Now the flames had found their way into the open sky. All would be well. They could breathe. They could take it easy. They could just rumble and roll themselves, great mounded billows folding back into themselves, demonstrating what it really meant to be fire. 4 firemen were walking toward Dempsey. They were weaving, stumbling against each other, bumping shoulders, unsteadying themselves all the more. The man in the lead was using a pole of some kind, with a 2-pronged hook at the tip as a walking staff. One of his boots had flopped down to his calf, and his helmet was tipped slightly to the side, an attempt, perhaps, at style. At each building they'd stop, and the lead man would try the door. When it failed to yield, he'd pound on it, wait, and then they would all move on. Dempsey heard one of them say, "They know we're here. They know we're freezing." The men stomped up the 3 steps onto what had been the docking platform of the building next to Dempsey's. After he'd yanked twice at the door, he pounded with his fist, then looked up at some lighted windows on the 3rd floor. "We're freezing!" he yelled. But his voice was caught up in the shouts, roars, and crashing from the burning building behind him. Dempsey thought she should at least point out that there were 6 doorbells arrayed along the sides of the doors, each an independent installation that accommodated the occupied lofts inside. It then occurred to her that she herself had only to open her own door with her own key, and the men would find warmth, or at least shelter, since the hallways of the building were unheated. Or she could invite them to her loft. If there was time, they could warm themselves, recover their strength, and return to battle the blaze refreshed. Who could do less? She could make coffee. She was not by nature an easy host, but for 4 freezing and exhausted firemen, she might be able to mutate into something more gracious. "You looking for a place to warm up?" "No," said one man standing slightly behind the others. "We're selling the Encyclopedia Britannica." "All right, then." "Wait, yes." The lead man's voice was more weary than repentant. "We've been relieved for a quick break. We're looking for a place to warm up." "Well, you've come to the right place." Dempsey fiddled in her coat pocket for the keys. The clip of a Bic pen was caught in the key ring. She jiggled it free, then drew the keys out of the pocket. A roll of certs dropped to the cement. No one stooped to pick it up. She put the key into the lock and opened the door. The metal scraped along the cement. The hinges whined, the door itself complaining of the cold. By the time Dempsey had taken the key out of the lock, the firemen were inside. She retrieved the certs, then closed the door behind her. The men had plopped themselves down onto the bottom steps of the wide stairway that led to the floors above. The lead man had set his staff against the wall and had lowered his head onto his crossed arms. The others leaned either against the wall or the stairway railing. They were breathing heavily as if they'd run rather than stumble down the block. Gray mucus flowed from their nostrils, wetting the black soot on their chins, dripping down onto the clasps that held closed their rubber coats. "You want to come upstairs? It's warmer there." Dempsey pulled the thick chain that would bring down the old freight elevator. The clanking and clattering began as if a full complement of galley slaves had been lashed into labor. The leader raised his head and drew his gloved hand over his ears, then let the hands fall back to his knees. "We're okay here," he said. "We don't have that long, but thanks." Some of the words were obliterated by the clanking elevator chains, but Dempsey thought she understood the meaning. "I'll bring down some coffee. Black okay?" "Sounds great," the man said. The elevator, with a thump, arrived. Dempsey gave the upper half of the door a quick hoist, sending the lower half down into the floor. After she'd stepped inside and the door began to close, she saw that the man had lowered his head again onto his arms. From the large pot that brewed endless amounts of coffee that she drank while spending long hours at her easel, Dempsey brought them down cups of it, not on a tray but on a piece of plexiglass.